session for our regular meeting, please?
Motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Second, thank you, Mr. Wallace. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Chris? Mr. Dorr?
None.
Ms. Zahosky?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
And myself is a yes too. So we are now out of executive session into regular session. And just bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to bring something up. At this point, Sam, can you please post the American flag so we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, so at this point, I'd like everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so let me just join my meeting here. Okay, so with that being said, I'll hand it over to Dr. Enriquez for a superintendent report.
Okay, thank you. Sam, do we want to put the presentation up, please, and share our screen? Before I begin this evening, I want to take a minute to acknowledge Greg Meyer. Greg Meyer has served on the Board of Education for 12 years as a volunteer. And Mr. Meyer has decided, as we know, with a very heavy heart, not to run again. And I felt that it is so important that we acknowledge him tonight and that we thank him for his many years of service. So thank you.
Thank you.
Without further ado,
Greg.
Mr. Snyder and I.
Guys,
Yes.
if I interrupt, thank you very much. That was very nice of you, and thank you all. You all will be missed.
We'll miss you too, Greg. Thank you. So without further ado, Mr. Snyder and I are going to present the 2021 proposed budget this evening. Am I able to change slides here, Sam, or you're doing that?
You just tell me when you want it done.
Okay. So on the agenda for this evening, we have the Board of Education budget goals, which we will be reviewing. We're going to discuss enrollment trends, the proposed budget reductions, proposed expenditure budget. There is the three-part budget, the state aid and our reserves, the anticipated revenue budget, as well as important dates and information for our voters. As you know that in January, the Board of Education adopted specific budget goals. The first to design and adopt a budget that stays within the tax cap limitations, a budget that maintains our programs, adequate resources, and has the support of the community in mind. To design and adopt a budget that recognizes the fiscal reality for the Riverhead residents, taxpayers, and to develop a budget that seeks to identify and implement cost efficiencies in all areas.
Just hang on 1 second, Dr. Enriquez, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, obviously there were
Good.
effects
Okay,
of the
there we go. Sorry.
pandemic on the district's budget. So we're up to the next slide, Mr. Snyder.
Yep, there we go.
The
Sorry.
district has continued to pay all of our permanent, full, and part-time employees since we closed on March 13th. We have saved some money on certain purchases, substitute employee costs, fuel, and select student events that unfortunately we were not able to hold. Funds that are unspent in this year's budget are going to be appropriated into the reserves to offset the anticipated reductions that we are expecting in our state aid. Next, we'll take a look at student enrollment trends. And as we've discussed in the past, we're all aware that we are a district with continuously increasing enrollment. And you see we start there at 2009-10 and to this current school year, 19-20. Not only are we increasing overall enrollment, but specifically increases to our ENL student population, as well as an increase to the population of our students with special needs. And you can see that represented in this chart here. Okay, Riverhead Charter School.
So in addition to the increasing student population, one of the greatest expenses in the budget is the tuition that we have to pay to the Riverhead Charter School. We talked about this at our meeting, I believe, in February, in February, but it's also worth looking at again. The charter school, Riverhead Charter School, has held its lottery for admission for kindergarten students, and we actually have to increase our projection next year. We, in February, had projected about 430 Riverhead resident students at the charter school, but we're looking at 466 students next year based on the number of kindergarten students that they are admitting. You can see on this slide here that we're estimating about almost $19,000 a year tuition, meaning that the budget will have to have appropriated in it $8.7 million for charter school tuition for the 466 kids that we're estimating, students that we're estimating are going to be there next year. This represents one of the largest expenses in the budget and one that we have no control over.
Okay, so for our proposed budget reductions. I'm sorry, Mr. Snyder, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So these are our proposed reductions. All of our personnel reductions are through attrition rather than layoffs, and that's a very good thing that we have achieved here. So we are considering many out-of-the-box ways to continue to meet the needs of our students and staff. And with those budget reductions included are 3 administrative positions. Within the 2 AIS math positions, we're not cutting teachers. These 2 math positions will be returning to the classroom to replace retirees. So again, it's through attrition and not through layoffs. The 1 social worker position that is listed here, the payment will be shifted to the school improvement grant. So those funds will be used instead of impacting the general fund. So to be clear, there's no, a social worker will not be cut here. An ENL position, a clerical position, maintenance, 1 maintenance position, and 1 transportation office position is included. In terms of programs and reductions, the high school summer school will be eliminated. We talked about briefly the school resource officer earlier. With the Board of Education, I have reached out to the town via Chief Hager Miller and asked for support, described our fiscal reality for the next school year, and asked for assistance with this position. Instructional and non-instructional equipment and materials will be reduced, as well as overtime for the non-instructional personnel.
So looking therefore, if you calculate all that in, this is the spending plan for next year in summary form. You can see that we are able to project a reduction in our general support, which is the areas that go in to supporting the instruction in the classroom, which includes the central administration, maintenance, buildings, grounds. There are modest increases in the other areas. All in all, the voters are going to be asked, subject to board approval, the voters will be asked to approve a $147 million spending plan, which is a spending increase of 1.87%. Another way that we like to present this is the three-part budget, which breaks the expenditure plan down into administrative, program, and capital expenses. You can see in next year's budget, we're able to drop the portion of the budget in administrative and capital down, and thus increase the programmatic expenditures for impact on what the students need.
Okay, in terms of the Riverhead State Aid, we've spoken about this before. For a district of our size and a district that is seeing enrollment increases in all areas, but in particular with students with special needs, the numbers of our students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, we know, then you can see from this chart, that Riverhead does not receive the funding that it deserves. I certainly encourage everyone in the community to get involved with the Save Our Schools initiative that we posted to Facebook. I think it's really important that we allow our voices to be heard, certainly at the state level, in terms of our need for increased not only state aid, but we've talked about the foundation formula and so on and so forth. So you can see here, these are our state aid, what's budgeted, what's anticipated, the change, and once again, we know that we don't receive enough for a district that has experienced and continues to experience the change at the levels that we're seeing.
So in addition to state aid as a revenue source, we also have our reserves. The spending plan that we're recommending here is that we can expect next year, as the previous slide says, we can expect that there's going to be reductions in state aid during the year. Right now, what I believe we can project here is that by taking money that's left over from this year's budget and putting it into various reserves, and you can see the reserves listed here that we'll probably be using, we can then take from those reserves next year in order to absorb potential losses in state aid without having to disrupt academic programs during the year. So you can see that, for example, next year we're projecting spending $200,000 out of the ERS and TRS reserves. This is money that's reserved, held in savings to spend on costs of the retirement system. Well, if we lose state aid next year in a particular amount, the board can appropriate additional money out of those reserves to make up for that lost revenue. So this is the reserve spending plan for next year, subject to change based on whatever reductions in state aid may come. The overall look at the anticipated budget revenue for next year shows that the property tax levy will stay within the levy cap for next year. And again, anticipated cuts in state aid will be mitigated by using existing reserves. We are including an increase in our tuition and services. I think we've discussed at previous meetings on March 10th that we were actually able to contract with 6 other surrounding districts for us to take over some of their bus routes when we have a shared transportation situation, so we can bring in some significant revenue that way to help offset our costs. And overall, you can see what the spending plan is there. Now, obviously, this is a unprecedented way of voting. I'm sure that the board and many members of the public are familiar with the Governor Cuomo's executive order and how we're to conduct this year's election. So all voters will have already or will shortly be receiving an informational postcard in the mail outlining the changes in the voting procedures as directed by Governor Cuomo. All voters will be voting by absentee ballot. The budget and all the supporting documentation will be posted on the district's website tomorrow. If there's any member of the public that doesn't have access to the website or would prefer to receive the information in mail form, please call me. My phone number is there on the screen, and I'd be more than happy to print everything out and mail a copy of the budget to the voter. However, all voters will receive an absentee ballot on or about May 26th. So the ballot, you can see a sample of what it's going to look like. All the voters are also going to receive a privacy envelope, which is the item on the bottom right of the screen. After you fill out the ballot, you put the ballot in the privacy envelope, you seal the privacy envelope, you sign your name on it, and then you put the privacy envelope in the self-addressed postage paid envelope and return it to the district clerk. All ballots have to be received by the district clerk at 5 p.m. on June 9th. It's not a postmark situation by June 9th, it is a received by June 9th. We are installing a drop box outside the district office for people who would prefer to leave the ballot in the drop box rather than rely on the mail to get it here by 5 o'clock on June 9th. Additionally, at our next board meeting will be a public hearing on the proposed budget. And I believe Mr. Meyer may have some comments on how that's going to work.
Okay, and in the meantime, if anyone has a question, we encourage you to reach out to us via email. And both of our emails, Mr. Snyder and my email, is here for anyone in the community that has any question. We're more than happy to assist. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Thank you, Dr. Enriquez. Does any board members have any questions with the presentation? Okay, hearing none. At this point, we're going to, I'm going to step back a little. I think I forgot to welcome everybody to tonight's Board of Ed meeting and the public watching along on YouTube. Here we are in our third Zoom meeting. Would have never thought we would have been here, and unfortunately, it looks like there's going to be at least one or two more, maybe. But we're continuing to you know, stay safe and practice social distancing. Hopefully, everybody at home is, and everybody's as healthy as can be. So, moving on to consent agenda, I'd like to let my dog out of the house because it's tapping on the back door. I'd like to, consent agenda, I'd like to get a motion on items A, B, C, D, E, and F as once from all of us, and then we'll go through everything else separate. So can I get a motion for items A, B, C, D, E, and F, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none. Mr. Dorr?
Yes.
Ms. Zahosky?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
And myself is a yes also. Mr. Conley didn't join the meeting, right? He still wasn't able to make. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing him.
No, I sent him a text message. He's working.
Okay. All right. No worries. Like I said, I only see 9, and there's a few people that aren't on my screen. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so that was motion approved for A, B, C, D, E, and F. Now we'll move on to item G, the call for a special district meeting. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Zahosky. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr?
Yes.
Ms. Zahosky?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
And myself is a yes also. Thank you. Moving on, item H. This will be the adoption of our 2021 proposed budget and property tax report card. Motion, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Downs. Second. Thank you, Ms. Zahosky. Questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Dorr?
Yes.
Ms. Zahosky?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
And myself would be a yes also. We have item I, approval of cafeteria proposition on ballot for the June 9th, 2020 special district meeting. Motion, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Hosky, Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
and myself would be a yes also. We have item J, approval of legal publication for special district meeting. Motion, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Second, Mr. Hosky. Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Hosky,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Mrs. Downs,
Yes.
and myself would be a yes also. Moving on, we have item K, approval of contracts. We have 3 of them. Can I get a motion, please, on all 3?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Hosky,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
and myself would be a yes also. Item L, first reading of new and revised board policies. These will be items 0110, 0110.1, 0110.1-R, 0110.2, 0110.2-R, 0110.2-E, 0115-E, 2520, 5500, 550-R, 8130, 8131, 8635, 8635-R, 8635-E. Can I get a motion for item L, please?
Motion.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hosky. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Hosky.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, thank you. Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
and myself is a yes also. Item M, we have approval of an agreement amendment. Motion, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hosky. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Hosky,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
and myself would be a yes also. Moving on to probably my favorite part of all agenda items, we have item N for an acceptance of donations. We have once again 100 Chromebooks from OLA of Eastern Long Island, and a donation of 120 Chromebooks and related equipment from the North Fork Tech Project and the Riverhead Central Faculty Association. On behalf of all board members and staff, like to thank both of these organizations for their donations for the Chromebooks. I'm sure they're getting out. The kids are making them, using them well, and I thank everybody for the donations. It's really a great thing. Over the last few weeks, we've accepted hundreds of Chromebook donations, and I think that's just a great outpouring from the district. So thank you to them. Did I do a motion yet or not?
No.
Okay, thanks. Can I get a motion for item N?
Motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second, was that Ms. Downs?
Yeah, second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Downs. Questions, comments, concerns?
I just want to thank everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with none being said, Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Ms. Zahosky,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis,
Yes.
Mrs. Downs,
Yes.
and myself would be a yes also with another thank you. So that concludes our consent agenda part. Moving on to old business, we really didn't get much old business in. We did receive a few things today. I believe I saw an email or two today that had to do with our agenda today. Today's agenda for the meeting. I do know we're going to answer some of those questions tomorrow. I'm going to take this opportunity just to throw in the information on how the proposed budget's going to go. So I have a little thing that I'll read here. So the Board of Education will hold a public hearing on our proposed budget on May 26th at 4 p.m. Members of the public wishing to comment for the record at this public meeting should send their remarks by email to the Board of Education or to the district clerk. During the public hearing, I will read these comments out loud for the record. Due to the ongoing pandemic, sending statements to us prior to the public hearing will be the only method for the public to comment on our budget. As a reminder, all of the budget information will be posted on our website beginning tomorrow, and all voters will receive an absentee ballot automatically at their mailing address, along with a to return the ballot. Ballots are due on June 9th at 5 p.m. So that's how we're going to go moving forward. I just want everybody to know that starting basically now, once we have the information posted on the presentation and our budget, worst case scenario, it'll be mid-morning tomorrow. It'll be posted on our website. Anybody having any questions for that, like was just stated, please email us so that when we are in the public meeting on May 26th, I can read all those comments. And that's it. So we'll move on. Opportunity for board members, reports or any remarks?
Sue, do you have the report?
Yes, I have a report on the policy meeting. The Intergovernmental Committee met on May 5th, and members of the Board of Education, Chris Dorr, myself, and Lori Downs were present. The committee reviewed proposed changes to several policies, which we just passed the first reading tonight. So on tonight's agenda for the first reading. So due to changes in state law aimed at sexual harassment in the workplace, NYSBA has split the current policy into two separate policies, one addressing students and the other addressing employees. For policy 0110, this policy was reconfigured as an introductory statement. For 110.1, NYSBA recommended some additional statements regarding sanctions to be enforced against all those who engage in sexual harassment or retaliation, and against district personnel who knowingly allow such behavior to continue. Also with 110.2 policy, NYSBA recommended some additional statements based on human rights law. And also the exhibit is a modified complaint form for reporting sexual harassment developed by the New York State Department of Labor for use in the school setting. Also, we looked at in policy 115-E, the exhibit for student bullying and harassment. So NISBA recommended modify complaint form, which will be used in our schools. So we did that. Policy 2520, board member training. This recommendation includes board mandated training for all board members on an annual basis and for the board president and vice president when newly elected. So current policy only mandates the training for newly elected, the state mandate training for newly elected board members. Also policy 5500 and the regulation of student records. This policy and regulation was modified to reflect recent state regulations implementing Education Law 2D regarding data privacy and security. Also, we talked about policy 8130, school safety plans and teams. So NISBA recommended that the language to address pandemic planning, and school bus drivers and monitors will be required to be on the safety team now and building emergency response teams. Plans must address the role of security personnel and SROs. Plans must be submitted to the respective authorities by October 1st moving forward. And the language includes the use of measures to temporary block door vision panels in the event of an emergency. So also this policy 8131, we talked about pandemic planning. This is a new policy which outlines steps to be taken by the district in light of the coronavirus and joint guidance with the New York State Education Department and Department of Health. Policy 8635 for information and data privacy. We did a few edits, added data privacy, modified to meet requirements of the state technology law and also Education Law 2D. And then also we included the Parents' Bill of Rights for student data privacy and security, third-party contractors, and supplement was also added. So we conducted a lot of work. I commend Christine Tona because she organized our meeting and we went through a lot of revisions and introduced quite a few new policies based on the conditions that we're in today. So I thank her and I thank our committee.
Okay, does anybody else have any other committee reports? I know I do. So I have a audit committee report. The audit committee made up of Sue Kukunis, Chris Dorr, and myself met on April 28th via Zoom video conference. Jill Sanders, the auditor from the external audit firm of Cullen and Danowski, reviewed the planning document that her firm prepares prior to beginning the annual external audit. Ms. Sanders discussed changes to the normal auditing procedures due to the coronavirus pandemic. These changes include reliance on the business office scanning documents to Ms. Sanders' firm and remote review of all files. Ms. Sanders noted that the calendar and schedule of the audit is also subject to change because of the pandemic. Dr. Enriquez commended Mr. Schneider and the business office for the work they have done to date on this audit. The committee engaged in a conversation about the extra classroom activity account, specifically changes in the accounting procedures mandated by GASB 84. The implementation date of GASB 84 is unclear due to the pandemic. Another thing that's put on hold, but we'll have to do. Ms. Sanders also reviewed some detailed findings of the federal single audit. The audit was accepted by the Board of Education at their April 21st meeting. The committee also discussed changes to fund balances due to the pandemic. The committee discussed how to properly use reserves for the 2021 budget without creating problems in the 21-22 budget and years subsequent of that. That's all I have for the audit committee. Any other board members have any comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Dorr.
I noticed on tonight's consent agenda, we did vote on the modification of club stipends. When it comes time for us to decide on the coaches, I would like to suggest that we have no modifications, especially on the varsity level. A lot of these coaches work well outside their regular season and are continuing to work now and helping their athletes find colleges and programs for them to continue their athletic careers in. I know that technically their practices started soon before this and ended quite quickly, but they do so much more than just the regular season. So I'd like us to take that consideration when it comes time for coaches. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Opportunity for RCFA. Once again, as of last meeting, the RCFA presented a statement. I do have one from them again that I will read. Members of the board, we are crushed by Governor Cuomo's announcement that school will not resume this year. Our members are doing their level best to reach our students through virtual platforms, but that cannot replace the face-to-face interaction that all of us long for. Our hearts break for our students who are missing out on everything Riverhead has to offer, especially the class of 2020, who will miss the last quarter of their senior year, along with numerous rites of passage associated with being a senior in high school. We understand that this decision was made out of an abundance of caution with the safety of our students, staff, and community in mind. Although we were saddened by this decision, we fully understand the rationale behind this executive order. What is of great concern, though, is the governor asking Bill Gates and Google CEO Eric Schmidt to reimagine education for New York State. Before Governor Cuomo seeks guidance from out-of-state philanthropists, he should consult New York State residents as well as the practitioners who serve children in our classrooms. The fact that Mr. Gates and Mr. Schmidt once sat in a classroom does not make them authorities on education. The people who stand in front of the classrooms are the experts, and excluding them from being a part of the process of reshaping education during this crisis just cements the recent paradigm of creating markets for companies to profit at the expense of students, schools, and communities. What needs to be reimagined is funding for public education in New York State. The inequities amongst individual districts and students within districts, the inequities amongst individual districts and students within districts have only been accentuated in this crisis. Accentuated in this crisis. There cannot be any talk of fixing, in quotes, education without addressing these inequities. Finally, the RCFA would like to thank outgoing board president, Mr. Gregory Meyer, for his 12 years of service to our school and community. Your passion for our students and schools is a refreshing reminder for why all of us are here, service to the public and our communities. Thank you, Mr. Gregory Wallace, RCFA president. Once again, that was the RCFA comments. At this point, does anybody have anything else? Last minute comments to add? Seeing none, we are looking for a motion for adjournment, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Mr. Dorr?
Motion, or yes.
Ms. Zahosky?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Dr. Kukunis?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, too. Thank you, everybody that tuned in for this, and hopefully everybody will stay safe, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.